The memory of that night has haunted me for years, an unwelcome ghost that lingers in the corners of my mind, constantly reminding me of the chaos and fear I experienced. I've often wondered what drove people like Arthur and James Holmes to commit such heinous acts. How does one cross that line from admiration to violence? It's a chilling thought that resonates deeply within me. After the incident with Arthur, I found myself withdrawing from social interactions. Too afraid to form any new connections, I moved to a different part of the campus, hoping the change of scenery would help me escape the shadows of my past. But the memories were like echoes, always returning to taunt me. I avoided crowded places, particularly those connected to the Joker mythos. Comic book stores, film screenings, and even Halloween events became no-go zones for me. One night, during Halloween, I decided to stay in and binge-watch a new series on Netflix. I thought a distraction would help me forget the chaos of my past. But just as I settled in with a bowl of popcorn, the doorbell rang. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. It was well past 10 p.m. Who could it be? Cautiously, I peered through the peephole, half expecting to see Arthur's manic grin staring back at me. Instead, I found a group of costumed kids, an innocent sight that should have brought a smile to my face. But the sight of them, dressed as various characters from Batman, sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, torn between opening the door for the trick-or-treaters or retreating into the safety of my apartment. Ultimately, I chose to ignore them and turned off the lights. As the minutes passed, I heard laughter and faint chatter outside, but one voice cut through the night, sending a shiver down my spine. Why so serious? A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and I quickly realized that it wasn't just a child imitating the Joker. It was a voice filled with malice, echoing the very sentiments I had feared. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding, as I dialed 911. The operator answered calmly, and I whispered my fears, explaining the situation without giving away my exact location. She assured me that help was on the way. Time stretched in agony as I waited, the laughter outside escalating into something sinister. I could hear them getting closer, their voices mocking, taunting. "Come on, open the door. Let's have some fun." I turned off my phone, silencing it so they wouldn't hear my panic. The laughter faded for a moment, and I dared to peek outside again. This time, I saw shadows moving in the dim light of the street lamp. A figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar silhouette. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized Arthur. But he wasn't alone. He had a small group of friends with him, all dressed in varying interpretations of the Joker. Their faces were painted, smiles stretching wide, laughter ringing like bells in the night. It was a nightmarish reunion, the reality of my past colliding violently with the present. My stomach twisted in knots, and I felt paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the door to my apartment rattled violently as they began to pound on it. "Let us in. We just want to have some fun." Panic surged through me, and I scrambled for the nearest escape route. My mind raced with thoughts of what Arthur might do if he found me. I considered climbing out the window but quickly dismissed the idea. Instead, I huddled in my closet, listening intently to their taunts and jeers. The group grew restless, their laughter turning into something darker. "Come on, let's see how serious you really are." Arthur's voice boomed through the door, sending shivers down my spine. I heard one of his friends shout, "Let's give him a real scare." That's when I knew I had to act. I slowly crept toward my phone, still hidden in the closet. I dialed 911 once more, whispering for help, my heart pounding in my ears. The operator was calm and assured me that they were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. My heart raced as I strained to listen. Then, I heard it, a faint scratching at the door, followed by the sound of Arthur's voice, low and menacing. "You can't hide forever. We know you're in there. It'll be so much fun to see that scared face of yours again." The minutes dragged on, and just when I thought they might leave, I heard sirens wailing in the distance. Relief flooded over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by dread. Would Arthur hurt someone before the police arrived? "Cops are coming. Let's get out of here," one of his friends yelled, breaking the silence. I held my breath, hoping they would flee. Moments later, I heard footsteps retreating, followed by the sound of sirens growing closer. I peeked through the cracks in my closet door and saw the flashing lights outside my window. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. I knew that even though the police would handle the situation, the shadows of my past would not vanish so easily. The door swung open, and 2 officers entered my apartment, flashlights cutting through the darkness. I emerged from my hiding spot, trembling and terrified, trying to explain everything. As I spoke, I caught a glimpse of movement outside my window. Arthur and his friends were still lingering nearby, watching the scene unfold, their laughter echoing in the night. The officers quickly assessed the situation, issuing commands for Arthur and his friends to leave the premises. They complied, but not without taunting me one last time. "This isn't over. We'll be back." In the days that followed, I learned that the authorities had issued a warning to Arthur, but that didn't ease my mind. I lived in constant fear, always glancing over my shoulder, always expecting him to show up again. To cope, I sought therapy, trying to unpack the trauma I had experienced. My therapist encouraged me to express my fears through writing, to confront the past instead of running from it. It was difficult, but with every word, I felt a bit of the weight lift off my shoulders. However, no amount of therapy could erase the imprint that Arthur and his actions had left on my psyche. I found myself increasingly drawn to the stories of others who had faced similar traumas, particularly those involving the Joker, a character whose dark allure had both fascinated and terrified me. One night, while browsing online, I stumbled across a forum dedicated to discussing incidents inspired by the Joker. I was both intrigued and horrified. The stories echoed my own experiences, tales of obsession and madness, of individuals who had taken the character's essence too far. As I read through the posts, I found myself drawn into a community of shared experiences. People recounted their brushes with individuals who had taken inspiration from the Joker, each tale darker than the last. One story in particular caught my eye. A woman who had been stalked by a man dressed as the Joker for months before he finally confronted her, leaving her terrified for her life. The more I read, the more I realized that I wasn't alone. There were others like me, survivors of encounters that felt too real, too close to home. The discussions ranged from personal anecdotes to discussions about the influence of media on mental health. I felt an odd sense of camaraderie with these strangers, a bond forged through shared fear. One night, after a particularly long day, I decided to post my own story on the forum. It was a cathartic experience, laying bare my fears and experiences for others to read. I hesitated before hitting post, wondering how people would react. But as the comments began pouring in, I was overwhelmed with support. People shared their own stories, offered advice, and even encouraged me to seek justice. Encouraged by this newfound community, I decided to take action. I reached out to local authorities, hoping to file a restraining order against Arthur. With the support of my therapist and the community I had found online, I felt empowered to confront the fears that had haunted me for so long. The court date arrived, and I found myself sitting in a sterile room, filled with anxiety. As I recounted the events, I could see the disbelief in the eyes of the judge. But I persisted, driven by the need to reclaim my life from the shadows of my past. After what felt like an eternity, the judge ruled in my favor. The restraining order was granted, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. But the journey didn't end there. In the months that followed, I continued to share my story online, inspiring others to confront their fears and reclaim their lives. I started a blog dedicated to discussing mental health and trauma, focusing on the intersections of pop culture and real-life experiences. As I wrote, I found solace in the act of sharing. The stories of others became intertwined with my own, and through this process, I began to heal. My blog gained traction, attracting readers who resonated with my experiences. I learned to channel my fear into advocacy, using my voice to empower others. Years later, I still carry the scars of that night with me, but instead of allowing them to define me, I've transformed them into a source of strength. I continue to speak out against violence inspired by media, striving to educate others about the importance of mental health awareness and support. In this world, where the line between fiction and reality often blurs, I've found my purpose. And while the Joker may continue to haunt my dreams, I refuse to let him dictate my narrative any longer. My story is one of resilience, of triumph over fear, and of the unwavering strength of the human spirit.